Chapter 12, Plan. Sprint Planning. Sprint Planning Summary. Product owner arrives with a single prioritized backlog that meets the team's definition of ready. The team commits to the maximum amount of work they have 80% or more confidence they can deliver in the next sprint with quality. The Scrum Master facilitates, picks music, maybe caters, maybe decorates, prepares by grooming the backlog with the product owner and grooming the definition of ready with the team. Can't start until the product owner arrives with a single prioritized backlog that meets the team's definition of ready. Is done when the team has committed to the maximum amount of work they have 80% or more confidence they can deliver in the next sprint with quality. Looks like the entire team in a room with walls covered in sticky notes. Time box, a maximum of 2 hours per every week of sprint length. The 5 events of Scrum accomplish the minimum administrative activity to operate a business and are streamlined to achieve their goals quickly when facilitated by a Scrum Master. Experienced teams gradually reduce and eliminate the 5 events of Scrum by conducting them continuously and without a formal start or stop, with Scrum Masters to verify the team is still receiving the value output of each of the 5 Scrum events. Why call them events and not meetings? A meeting, as a general term, can mean the type of collaborative work we see occur daily in the highest performing teams. So why not simply call these events the 5 meetings of Scrum? The highest utility answer we have heard so far comes from Vibhu Srinivasan, certified Scrum trainer. Vibhu explained meetings can get a bad reputation, especially when some companies allow meetings to be hosted in other rooms from where the work is done, quite literally taking people away from the work, or allowing agendaless meetings without a stated goal or definition of done. An event, says Vibhu, is like a wedding or a party, something you want to attend. You know what to do when you get there, you know what needs to be done, and you know when it is done or complete. Another answer comes from Jeff Sutherland, the co-creator of Scrum, stating that he and Ken Schwaber wanted to use names that were different enough to cause people doing Scrum and hearing about Scrum to know it was different from business as usual. We propose a highly practical reason for continuing the naming convention so that we can quickly learn from others. Thousands of teams all over the world are using Scrum, and because of the open culture that Scrum rewards, many of them share what is working and where their problems are. Many of these companies use the vocabulary exactly as Scrum Masters learned them, and maintaining this vocabulary lets us speak to each other and learn from each other, and read each other's papers and posts quickly and easily. Sprint planning cannot begin until the product backlog is populated with at least one backlog item that is immediately ready for work. This is defined by a team or group Scrum level definition of ready. For most companies, Bill Wake's INVEST acronym is all they need for a definition of ready. And teams post this on the wall of their room where they work. INVEST stands for invest criteria. The I is independently or immediately actionable. Ideally, all work to be done, all of our extra small projects are independent. This lets us prioritize the value to the business, capability building, morale building, and risk reduction. More on that in our book, Product Owner. Sometimes we must apply for a permit before we can pour a concrete foundation. Sometimes we must get the project funding contract signed before we can sign the services agreement for more cloud compute processing power. In these cases, projects that are dependent on another are placed in dependency order and labeled so we can keep track of the dependency. Physically or virtually, this is often accomplished with stickers placed on each work item and an explanation key. Teams typically have fun with this. While labels could be 1A and a dependent card coming later and farther down the product backlog saying 1B, more often the stickers are unicorns and aliens and the planets, with a key saying unicorns come before aliens and the planets come in order out from the sun. This playfulness creates the mental chemical cocktail for high creativity and high morale, as we mentioned earlier in our cited quotations from Dr. Ina Simonova. Note, it is possible to write a backlog that is fully dependent. Every card must be done in only one order. Writing a waterfall procedural plan can create this. A backlog written this way has the least agility, the least ability to inexpensively reorder the work to maximize value and help eliminate the 80% of the product backlog that is the lower value. Because of this, the team continuously rewrites the product backlog with the help of other teams and stakeholders and technical experts to reduce dependencies while keeping the work in approximately sprint-sized projects. Ideally, each a valuable and complete extra small project. 2, the N in invest, negotiable. The backlog items should be very clear about who wants the work or will value from it, so that the team can ask that person or try to think from the perspective of that type of person while they are making design decisions and trade-offs. The value requested should be clearly stated. This lets the team be creative about how to provide the value. Why those people want the value should be clearly written. This enables maximum creativity from the Scrum teams and potentially novel solutions, or at least maximum understanding to create the leanest path to the desired value for the desired person. Do not restrict how the work should be completed. The product backlog works best when it does not say how to do the work. This is because stating the how to teams has the same negative effects as sending a detailed specification and design to a supplier, as we discussed in Chapter 10, XM, Extreme Manufacturing. If we are overly prescriptive in this way, we limit the possible solutions. Further, we limit all creativity to only the creativity of the authors of the work and at the time the work was authored, losing the possible solutions that could arise from the people doing the work. The people doing the work, by definition, know the most about how the product is being built. For maximum innovation, the team is clearly guided by a product backlog that says who wants it, what they want, and why, but not how. This format has become so valuable, it has a name and is used broadly. This method is called a user story, inherited from XP, or extreme programming. The format is, as someone, I can accomplish something so that value. Similarly, as who, I can what so that why. 3, the V in invest, valuable. The work should be labeled with expected business value, either as a number in currency or as a point estimate of relative value, identically to how effort or complexity is estimated. The difference here is value is a sum of market value, capability increase, morale building, and risk reduction. Note that the people doing the work estimate effort and/or complexity, but those same people may or may not be the most knowledgeable for value estimation. Part of the product owner's job is making sure a group regularly convenes composed of whomever is likely to have the most accurate understanding of the value of that particular extra small project and re-estimating the value. More on that in our seminar and book, Product Owner. All work in the backlog will have 2 numbers, an estimate of complexity or effort provided by the people doing the work, and an estimate of relative or absolute value provided by a group thought to be knowledgeable on the relative value of that work, compared to other extra small projects the organization could be doing around that time. Both estimates are reconducted regularly during an activity called product backlog refinement. More on that in a moment. 4, the E in invest, estimable. If the team declines to estimate an extra small project because they do not yet know enough about it, and the team takes that work into the sprint anyway and tries to complete it, the team is at a very high risk of building nothing valuable and wasting their time with throwaway work and reducing their morale. The most successful strategy is to put that work further down the backlog and write research stories, likely extra small projects. The research is conducted this sprint to learn more about the project to be done in order to provide an estimate. These research stories are sometimes called technical spikes or research spikes. The analogy here is to a spike or piton driven into a rock wall to help climb it and get a better view of what type of terrain we are navigating. Research spikes ideally fire a tracer bullet through a tiny bit of planning, analysis, building, testing, and deploying, just like every project in Scrum. These tracer bullets cut narrow slices through all the phases of the project and ideally build a walking skeleton. A walking skeleton is a partially usable technology test of one approach to delivering the solution. If building the walking skeleton teaches us that the approach is valid, we keep using it and build on it in future sprints. To keep using a walking skeleton, we must introduce more robust modules, interfaces, and refactor the design. This is called refactoring the ilities. The ilities are often maintainability, scalability, affordability, durability, etc. If the walking skeleton shows we have chosen a suboptimal or doomed to fail approach, or technology stack, or material and machining stack, we discard it. In either case, we can move the card to done and claim the velocity. We have successfully answered a hypothesis about that approach. We can think of it as Thomas Edison did. I have not failed. I have just found 10,000 ways that will not work. Since we likely do not know the complete set of possible approaches, open-ended research like this is typically modeled in a burn-up chart and not a burn-down chart, as we discussed in Chapter 9, Plan, Release Plan. 5, the S in INVEST, sized to fit. The work should be an extra small project that is likely to be completed within one sprint. We should stress that this includes testing. Before a sprint starts, here in the sprint planning event, the team doing the work may split the extra small project into daily goals that they can swarm and mob on together. A very new team may create tasks, but Scrum Masters know to avoid splitting work into tasks so small that only one person can do the work. Working alone erodes team spirit and reinforces a culture of individual work, which prevents high-speed collaborative teams from evolving into a complex adaptive system. The product backlog will likely have just 4 product backlog items, each representing an extra small project, each about the size of a sprint, giving us 4 sprints of ready backlog. The teams discuss the work during product backlog refinement and prepare with research stories each sprint leading up to that work to validate the intended approach. If work is too large and interdependent to be split into valuable, testable, independent, and parallel executable chunks that fit inside a sprint, the team needs to add cards to the backlog to reevaluate the modular architecture of the too large project. The team may need to hire an expert architect to consult or attend several lunch and learns or otherwise improve their architecture skill. 6, the T in INVEST, testable. If the team is not able to explain how they will test for business value before the team starts the work to create that business value, the risk is inordinately high. That backlog is not ready to be pulled into a sprint for work. We recommend rereading the 4th part of the INVEST criteria again above, estimable. The resolution is our Scrum Master will guide the team humbly and politely to add research stories or capability building stories. For more on testable, see test-driven development in Chapter 10, XM, Extreme Manufacturing. Product backlog refinement. Our Scrum board has a not ready column at the far left for ideas, new projects, critical support initiatives, customer requests, investor demands, regulatory compliance demands, or anything else the team is considering or must do. This column holds work to be considered, but which is not yet meeting the team or team's definition of ready. The process of moving cards from not ready to product backlog is an activity called product backlog refinement. Scrum professionals, such as our Scrum Masters, will define product backlog refinement as an activity and not an event. This distinction is not essential for the flow of the work in almost all cases. However, as this is a master class, we will define it here. In the Scrum framework, an event has an essential output, without which the team would fail to perform as a complex adaptive system and be very unlikely to achieve hyper-productivity, the design goal of Scrum, and high levels of emotional health, as reported by neuroscientists who study the way in which the Scrum framework encourages participants to think, and the chemicals released when using a human brain in these ways. Again, the events are to be transcended and skipped as soon as responsible. The output of the events, I'm going to highlight that super long sentence. I wanted to just keep going, but that sentence is, I mean, it's all great stuff, but that needs to be split up into maybe 3, 4, or 5 sub-sentences. The output of the events is what we currently understand to be required to maintain the complex adaptive system performance and the known stable interface, allowing the anti-fragile group agile organization to dynamically flex, grow, or shrink, or split or merge without significant disruption to the system. An activity is only a required output, but not a defined method of achieving that output. Product backlog refinement has the output of product backlog that meets the team or group agile's or group Scrum's, group agile's definition of ready. How that is accomplished is completely flexible and left to the people doing the work and guided by their Scrum Master. Scrum Masters must be able to effectively reach this required output, or the Scrum framework will seize and fail. To prevent this, a Scrum Master masterclass will share specific methods to achieve the goal of product backlog refinement, as if it were an event in Scrum. A note on why this situation exists. As of this writing, Ken Schwaber, one of the co-creators of Scrum back in 1994, believes product backlog refinement is necessary, but no specific approach is proven significantly more effective than most other likely approaches, and therefore the definition of Scrum should not force a particular format or event to accomplish it. Jeff Sutherland, the other co-creator of Scrum back in 1994, believes that enough good practices have been tested in high-performing companies to make a tight enough recommendation on how to conduct product backlog refinement to define this activity as an event. Let us not trouble ourselves with this backstory. We can use it only for our personal interest if that is intriguing to us. We simply need to know how to work with groups of various sizes and help them move vague, loosely defined ideas towards meeting the definition of ready. Anyone can add anything to the not ready column at any time, and the team swarms to keep this column tidy. For teams using a virtual Scrum board like Atlassian Jira, Microsoft Azure, DevOps, version 1, CA Agile, Scrummy, Carica, Trello, Lino.it, Linoit, or any of the other over 200 online Scrum board virtual tools, the important step is that the board must be visible in real time at all times to all teams. Otherwise, when someone starts working on the board, the affected teams cannot notice and decide if they would like to collaborate at the moment the collaboration is most fruitful, which is when someone is already working on the board. Physical boards are the easiest for this. We see the body language of the person or people looking at the board and what cards they are moving around or rewriting. This gives teams maximum information to decide if it is a net benefit to join at the board and participate or stay heads down and working. Next best to being in one big room together is virtually seeing a card starting to be edited. Virtually, we may have difficulty knowing if the actor is in a rush, being thoughtful, looking angry, looking happy, etc. Any work completed to move cards from the not ready state to the product backlog where work meets our definition of ready, typically the invest criteria, is called refinement or grooming. Teams can have set refinement times and often make it a game. Refinement Cafe is a 15-minute game played every day with your favorite beverage. In our observance, very fast and focused teams don't need a set time. They work the not ready backlog a little bit every day. These teams choose their optimum time, and their Scrum Master facilitates. How to facilitate? The process is very similar to facilitating estimation, as described in Chapter 8, Estimate. We solicit information to be shared while avoiding anchoring an opinion, evaluate if there is a consensus on approach, or if we need research work in the backlog first to test and learn our way to an agreed approach. We then estimate the effort or complexity, or re-estimate the effort or complexity, if the approach or information shared has changed substantially. The product owner organizes an estimate of the value of the work, possibly with a different group of estimators who likely first conduct a SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats estimate. We then discuss and consensus vote on each aspect of our definition of ready. Often this voting is accomplished with one of three techniques. Voting techniques. 1, fist to 5. Each team member doing the work is asked if they agree with a proposal, and all team members vote simultaneously to reduce anchoring. The voting method is holding up a fist for 0, or that person believes the idea has no chance of success, to 1 finger, always the pointer finger, to signify the idea has a chance, but appears very high risk of failure. Then 2 fingers, then 3 fingers, which means the voter supports the idea, and this is a consenting vote, to 4 fingers, and finally 5 fingers, meaning the idea is extremely low risk or extremely likely. For the definition of ready using invest, the vote may happen like this. The Scrum Master or their agreed proxy will read the proposed product backlog item aloud, then ask fist to 5, is this backlog item immediately actionable and independent? If the majority of votes are 3 fingers or more, the vote passes, and the facilitator then asks the team to vote if the product backlog as written is negotiable, and so on. Method 2, Roman voting. Very similar, the team or team of teams simultaneously vote. This time, the vote has only 3 options: thumbs up, thumbs down, or thumbs sideways. Thumbs sideways means I support the majority and I will not complain about it afterwards. Voting method 3, dot voting. The facilitator, which is either the Scrum Master or someone they have trained, writes the categories to vote on a whiteboard, virtual or in person, and asks all the voters to draw dots on the categories they endorse, and not to draw dots on categories the voter does not want to support. The number of dots per voter is typically 3, given a second order dynamic. The voters may place all 3 dot votes on one category to boost it, spread their 3 votes out across their 3 favorites, or load 2 dot votes on one category and 1 dot vote on the last category. Voting simultaneously is possible virtually, but much more difficult on a physical board, as people's bodies could block the boards they vote, which does mean anchoring has an effect, and the last voters have more impact, as they can observe the vote distribution and tip the scales. Early voters do have extra impact via consensus bias, halo effect bias, and charismatic bias. A note on consensus voting. The purpose is to get to a decision the team can feel unified around and support as quickly as possible. If the team is unsure and widely divergent, there is often a need for a research story to be added to the product backlog. Allowing discussion with opinion is not recommended, as this is often consciously or subconsciously about charisma and allows those who happen to be more outgoing that day to overpower those who happen to be more introverted that day, regardless of where the best information may actually have come from. To build the health around consensus voting, teams interested in healthy collaboration will typically consensus vote on most issues, multiple times a day. We have seen teams vote on where they want to go for team lunch, happy hour, what theme song they want to play this week before their daily scrum or daily stand-up meeting, voting on what color team jerseys to order, voting on how to rotate access of parking spaces, voting on who is going to lead the sprint review that sprint, voting on who will play each of the scrum roles next sprint, etc. We recommend this. In our observation, it builds expertise and quickness with the voting methods while having a lot of fun in the process. Now we have a ready backlog and we can conduct sprint planning. Sprint planning detail. The first meeting of a given sprint is sprint planning. It is done when the sprint backlog has a sprint goal, which is an XS project, an extra small project, written on it that the team has committed to achieve. Newer teams will then break down the extra small project into daily sized XXS projects, and possibly even smaller chunks, and place them in the sprint backlog. Experienced teams who have worked together for months or longer may work directly on XS project cards as they are familiar with the tasks inside. The team of developers owns the sprint backlog, and to prevent someone playing the product owner role from disrupting the team, as some previous project managers may have been forced to do, the product owner is not allowed to change the sprint backlog. Only the developer role can do this. In healthy teams, this rule is not needed, and all Scrum team members and members of supporting teams will swarm together daily. But if the team is failing to deliver the sprint goal at the end of the sprint, being formal about the rule that only developers can change the sprint backlog will protect against some old style management dysfunctions like command and control, multitasking demand, lack of respect for work in progress, interruptions, and micromanagement. Again, in a healthy organization where the before mentioned problems are not currently strongly affecting teams, everyone swarms on improving the sprint backlog daily and makes trade-off decisions of what to do next to achieve the extra small project that is the sprint goal. If the sprint goal becomes less valuable than another goal, for example, the customer requesting the extra small project, that is the sprint goal, goes out of business and defaults, the team and product owner will cancel the sprint, also called a sprint abort, and conduct sprint planning again to determine the extra small projects that can be the new sprint goal for the remainder of the sprint time. The sprint start date and end dates do not change, as preserving the rhythm of the sprint is healthier for the stress chemical balance in the teams doing the work. To start sprint planning, we do need a ready backlog of at least one extra small project that meets the team's definition of ready. Without this, we must first conduct the activity product backlog refinement, also known as backlog grooming. For this reason, at the very start of a new project or new team launch or new company, the first step is self-organization to form teams as described in Chapter 1, Introduction. Then each team produces possible ready backlog in product backlog refinement or grooming. These candidate projects are presented by the teams in Metascrum. In Metascrum, the highest value ready projects are chosen and pulled into each team. The teams then trade players to achieve their preferred mix to deliver on their chosen sprint goal. The teams then conduct product backlog refinement again to achieve consensus on approach and confirm the work meets their definition of ready, and then sprint planning is conducted. Here is our summary to review together. Sprint planning. Step 1, pull yesterday's weather. Yesterday's weather is the last 3 sprints average velocity that met the quality bar, the definition of done. Step 2, develop sprint goal. This is the script for the sprint review or demo. Step 3, rewrite sprint backlog to best achieve the sprint goal. The product owner invites stakeholders to match the sprint goal for the sprint review, for sprint demo. So they invite them at sprint planning to come to sprint review when it's scheduled. The Scrum Master researches and implements process improvements that match the sprint goal. The development team researches and implements technical practices, quality measures, and automation to best deliver the sprint goal. In the Scrum Master seminar, At this point, we conduct sprint planning for sprint 3 together. We post the sprint goal on our Scrum board to learn and to feel confident with and be ready to facilitate all 5 events in Scrum before the end of the sprint. We calculate our yesterday's weather from sprint 1 and 2 completed yesterday, write it on the sprint 3 burn down chart, and write it on the sprint 3 burn down chart. We then pull product backlog items from the top of the product backlog until we fill the sprint backlog up to or near yesterday's weather. We then determine if that backlog is the simplest, leanest, most direct path to achieve our extra small project for sprint 3, which is to learn and rehearse and feel ready to facilitate the 5 events in Scrum. If not, we rewrite the work in the sprint backlog. We continue rewriting until we have a plan that is likely to achieve our sprint goal during sprint 3. Sprint 3 in our seminar is from breakfast until lunch on the second day of the seminar. Now, all teams have a Scrum board, and the team of teams has a group Scrum board or group Agile board that looks a lot like this. All teams have a sprint 3 burn down chart, and the team of teams has a group Scrum board that looks similar to this. It is likely time for a break. The instructor in the seminar may offer that they walk around the building 3 times and offer anyone to join them. This gives a double bonus. More students are likely to get fresh air and improve their moods via the endorphin release and CO2 purge, depending on the air quality outside. And the conference room where these seminars often take place will have less people in it for 15 minutes and the door wedged open to refresh the likely by now over CO2 balanced air inside. Okay, that's a long sentence. But yeah, people get a new mood boost when the CO2 is purged, when fresh oxygen, fresh air comes in. So if a group of people does accompany the instructor, usually me, to walk around the building 3 times, they get up and get moving and get fresh air. But when the instructor leaves, at least when it's me, I'll wedge the door open. That allows fresh air to come through. Now, sometimes when I come back, someone's closed it already. So I try to keep it wedged open the whole time. So during break, there's airflow. Breaks are labeled on the sprint burn down chart, as are lunches. For example, like this. You can see the flat line here and it's labeled break. Without labeling breaks or lunches or any other time away from creatively solving problems, for example, a required emergency facility evacuation drill or a well-deserved company party, the next work completed looks like it took much longer than it did in actuality. While the team doing the work is likely to remember that this sprint, they're unlikely to remember that 10 sprints from now when they look back at this sprint to help them estimate future similar work. Also, when other teams and stakeholders, possibly customers or traditional managers from other parts of the organization that are not yet fully Scrum, those people will not have the context and will instead also be led to believe the next piece of work simply took longer. Instead, we draw a flat line on our sprint burn down charts for time away from creatively solving problems, and we label it with why we were away from creatively solving problems. In this case, we had a very healthy reason. It was team and group Scrum break time.